Okay, hot take here. So my thoughts are that control players can be just as dumb as aggro players. And just be clear here, I don't think any of you are dumb because I play these decks, you're here with me, you play these decks. None of us are dumb here because I certainly am not. All right, what am I going on about here? So I wanted to take a couple of minutes, probably going to be way more than a couple minutes, over the next couple weeks to explain control decks to everybody and kind of take away some of the mystique around them and around them being the hardest deck to play. So my thesis here is that people think that control decks are like these expert level decks. It takes big brain plays, really smart players, and players who are like pro level with a huge amount of experience to be able to play this like 4D game of chess with control decks. And I simply do not think that is the case. One of the things that gives control decks this kind of reputation and mystique is the fact that for decades in a variety of different card games, control decks have the reputation of being these really, really hard and challenging decks to play. People say it, they convince other people of it, people believe it, they sit down and they believe that that control deck player is going to be a better player than them, and they kind of, they give up almost before they even start playing. And this control deck is a hard deck to play, becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. People believe it's hard, so it becomes hard. But I don't think that's the case. I don't think that's the case because I am definitely not a control deck player. I've been playing Blurple and I've been winning with it. And what is the kind of big change in me here is that I had to set aside my aggro deck ways, and I had to figure out how to play the game differently. And as soon as I looked at it as a different game that I was playing, it became a lot easier to figure out exactly what Blurple wanted to do and to be able to play it. So this is a much bigger topic than I'll do in one video, and so I'll divide, I guess, my thesis of control decks are not hard to play into a couple different parts, and today we're just going to talk about big picture stuff. So I'm going to talk about the deck in general, what the deck wants to do, what its general strategy is from like beginning to end, but we're going to start with where most people start, which is learning how to play the game. So most people learn how to play the game with starter or intro decks. Starter or intro decks are fantastic products, but they're very linear in their approach and strategy. And there's a reason for that. A linear deck is an easier way to teach somebody how to play. It's going to get them learning the rules very quickly so that they can go on and they can either make their own decks or they can play these decks and alter them or whatever. Intro decks are awesome. And like I said, the fact that they are so linear and their strategy is play a character quest with character or play a character challenge with the character, it means that most people go from these intro decks and go to the next logical place, which is aggro decks. So why do they go to aggro decks as opposed to control decks? It's part reputation and part interaction stacking. So let's first look at kind of at first, my first glance of aggro, and then we'll kind of go into these 2 points here. So aggro has the same general strategy as these intro decks, at least when you look at like the very general nature of the deck. Play character, turn character sideways, play more characters, turn more characters sideways. Aggro is a really hard deck to play right, and I'll do another video on that. But in my opinion, you can play an aggro deck. So you can play a control deck badly and win, but you can't play an aggro deck badly and win. But most people look at the fact that aggro has the same strategy as the intro decks, and they assume that it is the next place to go. So just like control deck is a self-fulfilling prophecy of it is a hard deck to play, most people believe that aggro is an easy deck to play, and so again, it becomes that solidified reputation if everybody believes it to be so. Like the big character decks and like mid-range range decks are often the same type of thing. You're going to be playing as many characters as possible, and you're going to be, especially if you're playing against control, trying to win before control gets control. The next kind of thing here is talking about stacking interactions. And so what I mean by that is all of the moving pieces to the card games, the parts that kind of almost make them fun. The thing that is more complicated than just play character, turn character sideways. These would be like giving characters bonuses while questing or bonuses while challenging. These would be like giving something evasive, being able to bounce characters, so using the character first and bouncing it back to your hand. And all of these make the game look more complicated. And these are where combo and control decks live. They live in these complicated interactions. And I will say that I do say complicated simply because there is kind of a ideal order to play them in. And most people will get really caught up in the fact that they're looking at these cards and these options and these bonuses, and they're trying to figure out what is the best point to deploy them to be able to get the most kind of bang for your buck, if you will. And they come across as very not beginner friendly. However, I will say that it's not that they're complicated. It's just that there's more moving pieces to them. And more moving pieces tends to get the reputation of being a hard deck to play. So that's kind of the gist with the difference between aggro and control, is that aggro looks very simple as far as the strategy goes, and when it is top decking, it is very easy. It is play whatever you just drew and hope to be able to turn it sideways, whereas control has a lot of cards in their hand, a lot of options, a lot of interactions, and a lot of moving pieces that people get very stressed out about, wanting to make sure that they play them right. And that's kind of, I guess, where we're going to start. They have two very different strategies. So if you've been playing aggro and starter decks and you go to play control, if you take the strategy that you're going to that you were trying and that you've kind of mastered with aggro and starter decks, and you try to apply it to control, you are going to lose, because that is not what the deck wants to do. And now we're going to go into what it wants to do. So if we can switch our default play strategy, we can understand control. It is the exact opposite, like I said, of aggro and starter decks. And so what does that mean? Well, control wants to establish a board state and then gain control over the board, exactly what its name implies. This means that it's not an early game deck. In fact, most of the time it's not even a mid-game deck. Control decks live and breathe and die in the late game. If you can't win against Blurple by the time they hit like Elsa or Hades at like 6-7 ink, you are going to lose. It doesn't matter if you're at 18, 19 lore. As soon as control gets control over the board, it is a very different game. And that's kind of also the reputation that it has there. If it gets up there, most people feel demoralized. And I will admit, I can feel very demoralized when I'm at 18 lore and can't keep a character on the board, because control has control. So what helps control get control over the board? It's part removal, part card draw, and in the case of Blurple, part ramp. Let's go into each one of those, I guess, separately here. So first off, removal is very important because it stops your opponent from doing what they want to do. The big kind of early game removal, especially for Blurple, tends to come in the form of characters, because characters is kind of what you have to be able to play. Oftentimes these characters like the Royal Guard or Rafiki are just there to sit there and either threaten your opponent. So if your opponent turns their Daisy or their whatever they're playing early game sideways, your character is there to say, you turn that sideways, you will get lore out of it, but I'm going to take it out. Or, so that might stop them from questing, or it does exactly that. It allows you to take out the early game plays. So oftentimes these early game characters that you're playing, since they're there as essentially removal cards on layaway, you don't want to be questing with them. If they gain you no lore, that is okay. That is not their point. Their point is to be able to stop or blunt or stall the early game aggro decks to be able to get you to that mid to late game so you can survive. The mid to late game removal stuff is way more effective. Songs like Into the Unknown, which I always say Into the Inkwell, but Into the Unknown, or Hades, Elsa Fitzspirit, Elsa, the Spirit of Winter, those are all fantastic ways to deal with your opponent's characters, to be able to remove them and get them to the point where they're empty board and you can just freely quest. You can see how, and I'm sure if you've played against control, you know how at that 5 to ink spot is their sweet spot, and that's when they start to gain control and just dominate the game. Card draw is also just as important as removal. And one of the reasons for this is because you need options in your hand to be able to have multiple options to be able to deal with your opponent. If you are waiting on top deck removal, and you're just having to play whatever removal comes off the top of your deck, it is not nearly as good as effective as having options like you have a Elsa Fitzspirit, you have a Into the Unknown, and you have a Hades, which means you have 3 ways to deal with your characters. You can choose the best one for the best situation, and I have 2 more for the next couple turns. Here's my hot take here as well, and I'm going to do another video on this one. You can play control badly and win, but you can't play aggro badly and win. One of the reasons for this is because if aggro misuses their resources and they lose them, they're going to get to that top deck mode quicker, which means they're going to lose the game. If control misuses their resources, they have a whole bunch of cards in their hand from that card draw, which means that they have more options to be able to kind of undo their errors and be able to gain control of it. Now, I'm not saying that if you play control badly, you're going to win, but you stand a better chance at winning than an aggro deck does if they play badly. So that is kind of the big thing about, I guess, card draw there, and that is what Blurple has in spades. It has a huge amount of card draw, and that card draw, those options, make it so that you can win the game. Finally, we have ramp. So as I've established, Blurple is a late game deck, and you want to get to that late game as quickly as possible, so you want to be able to ramp to be able to get there faster. So now we're going to put this plan together. So the last part that I'm going to talk about for today is kind of this like putting the whole thing together, looking at the big picture and like the full plan from like beginning, middle to end. And I'm just going to talk about Blurple here. However, you can substitute any control deck in your mind, and the general gist will be the same. So first off, Blurple requires a strong willpower and patience. You need to be able to concede the first part of the game to your opponent, and you need to be cool with that because they're going to try to race past you, and they know that they have to win before you get control over the board, which means they're going to quest fast. You might not be able to deal with all of their questing, and that's okay because somebody only wins when they get to 20 lore. On many occasions, on both the aggro deck side and the control deck side, I've seen the aggro deck come and be at like 15, 16 lore, and Blurple's at like 3 or 4, and yet Blurple still wins the game. And how do they do this, you ask? Well, first off, the control player is used to being in this position, and so they don't do what is the kind of like default go-to here, which is looking at your opponent being so far ahead and just thinking, I've already lost. The first kind of lesson here is that willpower thing. You need to believe that you can win, and you need, as a control player, to be able to accept the fact that your opponent's going to get ahead of you, and that's okay. You have a plan for when they get ahead of you. You're not going to bother questing with your early turn plays because if the aggro deck can take them out, you don't have them to be able to threaten the aggro deck. And in a couple of positions, I've definitely been the aggro player refusing to quest, knowing that the Blurple player is going to take out my characters, and I don't want to have an empty board. Likewise, on the other side, I've been on the Blurple side and have just kind of sat my Royal Guard there and have waited for the aggro player to turn their card sideways so that I can start choosing my battles and picking how I want to take out the characters. You're going to pair that with card draw to be able to get options to that mid to late game part so that you have all of the removal options in your hand, and a lot of them stick around on characters so that they can stick around and gain you lore over the next couple turns. As soon as your opponent has an empty board, you are going to win the game. And that's kind of the big mystery about control. It's not hard. It just requires you flipping your mindset and your default strategy, realizing that you don't want to quest. It's okay if your opponent gets ahead of you because you are going to win in that mid to late game if you can stop them then and kind of quest out. Nobody wins till they hit 20 lore, so if your opponent is still even at 19, you still have a chance to be able to stop them and to be able to win. So that is kind of the gist that I have here. We're going to go and see this in action. I have a game that I recorded with John a couple of weeks ago, maybe a month ago at this point in time. John plays Blurple, has played Blurple for a while, very good Blurple player. And I'm going to do the tough part right now where I'm going to try to voice over and explain what he's doing. And in an attempt to kind of like, I guess, show you this whole general strategy with Blurple and how it makes a difference and how it wins. Over the next couple weeks, I'm going to do more videos on Blurple and Control, and hopefully by the end of it, you will feel as ready and prepared to pick up Blurple and play it, and hopefully you'll be able to play it just as good as any of those pro players. So let's take a look at this game and see if I can explain well everything that I've just explained in theory. All right, so John is a very good player, very smart player, and he really likes to play these control decks, and he's really good at it. So we're going to start here in the very first game of the match, and we are doing our mulligans. So I'm obviously on the aggro list, as you can see there. I'm kind of flashing the camera in my hand so you can see what I have, and so is John. So John is going to start with playing the Royal Guard. He knows I'm playing aggro, and like I had said, being able to play things that he can use to remove my character's early game is important. At the very least, makes me potentially second guess questing, and that Royal Guard will do that. Turn 2, like I said before, I'm a little bit behind here, is ramp. So you want to be able to be getting up to turn 4 ink on turn 3 is your most ideal thing, and being able to play that card drop. Card draw, really important for Blurple because it gives you your answers in your hand. As you can see, I'm starting to kind of get down there on cards in my hand, though I do have a good amount for aggro. But John will just get more and more as the game goes on. I'm going to be playing some cards to be able to make it so that he can't challenge my characters. That's kind of my game plan, but that's okay. Like I said, aggro can get pretty far up there in lore, and so long as Blurple has answers, like say Hypnotic Strengthening a Genie to be able to take out my big questing Nala there, that is going to help him get control. So John's at 0, I'm at 7, but you can see that as he has more and more ink than me and more cards in his hand, he can start to deploy more characters quicker to be able to stop me from doing what I want to do. So I'm going to quest, and he is going to be looking at a lot of characters that can deal with my characters. So if it is a race to be able to take out Blurple, aggro decks really need to be getting there pretty darn quick. So I'm going to Strength of Raging Fire his Genie. One of the reasons I'm doing that, maybe should have chosen the Basil because the support definitely will make a big difference. But he has enough characters and he's getting to late game where no matter what I do, he's going to have another option for answers in his hand. So he plays another Genie. Card draw, like I said, very important to be able to keep as many answers in his hand as possible. We're both looking, I think, like we have 3 cards in our hand here. And I have a Tiana. There's lots of ways that Blurple can deal with Tiana, but being able to deal with my heavier questers first is going to be more important. So being able to tap down the Nala there with the Elsa is going to take 3 lore off the table, which is important. And then being able to support the Genie to be able to take out that Nala for him also means that he can get a little bit of lore by questing with the Basil and be able to take out my character with his Genie. So when you're playing Blurple, you bear in mind that it's okay if aggro or any other deck for that matter does get ahead on board. Card draw, again, very important. So he's got extra cards in his hand. You can see how loading up his hand is going to give him those answers. I did see a Hades in there, and he's at the number of ink where he can just start to kind of play 1 answer a turn to answer whatever I'm playing. So I am at the point where I'm pretty near at top deck mode. I didn't see my hand there, but I think I'm on top deck mode here with 2 characters out. Terrible feeling. So he's going to play a Hades and he's going to get rid of my bodyguard, which will let him take out my Nala and no problem. So 3 characters on Blurple's side. I'm at 14 lore, so I should be at a good point here, but the fact that I'm on top deck mode playing whatever comes off the top, and it's never going to be enough for Blurple, and he can just kind of control the board by moving damage counters around with Bell, getting rid of stuff with Hades, and now at this point in time, he can be drawing more cards with the Dumbo. So 17 to 14, you can see how Blurple took control because they controlled that early part of the game. Moving on to game 2. I am on the play, so that's where aggro wants to be, but that doesn't necessarily put Blurple behind. Now, he does have his Rafiki out to threaten my Daisy, but it's not going to be enough to completely take out my Daisy, and I am going to be able to quest a little bit more. So aggro, I have found, can win a lot more often on the play than on the draw. You can just kind of see there how the Rafiki is not going to be used to quest. It's going to be used to put some damage into my characters, but the fact that he doesn't have, say, like the Tippo out to be able to support the Rafiki meant that it was not an even trade for him. So he wasn't able to take that Daisy out in one fell swoop, which did give me the opportunity to unload with more characters. So a Tiana is going to be pretty hurtful here. And I'm going to Strength to get rid of his only character. So this is, I guess, a great example of how Blurple does need to get to that mid to late game. If somebody is able to just overwhelm Blurple with speed and with characters, it puts Blurple and thus control in a bad situation because they're having to respond too much to what's going on the other side of the field, as opposed to pushing their own game forward, like say ramping with their characters, or being able to kind of like deploy their own threats. They're instead having to just deal with whatever's there. So devastating board state here on my part here. I'm already at 13 lore by turn 4. which is just a great feeling again for the aggro player, but control is having to play catch up here. And we're just going to call the game there. So that's, I guess, how you win against control, is you really, really have to raise. Going to go on to game 3, and Blurple is back on the play, and he's going to start how he has in the last couple turns, which is playing a Royal Guard. Now, like we saw, it can't take out a Daisy in one fell swoop, but it can take out that Aurora, and that Aurora is kind of the discount giver to princesses, and so it is totally worth taking out, just like it's worth, for me, questing to be able to get extra princesses out. However, I'm not going to quest, and the reason I'm not questing is because I know that Royal Guard is there, and I can't do really much about it. It's just going to take out my characters, so it's not worth losing my characters to the Royal Guard. He's going to quest the Royal Guard and then bounce it with the Elephant, which will let him get a little bit of value off of the Royal Guard. And now this Elephant is just this massive threat that I'm going to have to deal with. A 3/7 is tough enough on its own, but the fact that he can start to Elsa down my characters and put a little bit of damage on his Elephant while taking out my characters is going to mean next turn he can move that damage counter around and start to just kind of clean up my field as effectively as possible. So this is kind of those moving pieces that I was saying with Blurple. There's a lot of interactions and a lot of moving pieces, and though it's not necessarily hard, there is a complication to it because there are choices, and a lot of people, you've heard of that choice paralysis there. A lot of people can kind of get shut down by the amount of choices that it has, but that is what makes control decks so strong, is its huge amount of choices. So the damage from Mim was able to clean up my Mulan. I think I played it hoping I could get something better in my hand there, but you can see that the evasive is able to quest a little bit, and that 3/7 is hard for me to deal with, especially playing a small aggro deck. There's not much I can do about that Madam Mim other than hope that I can get enough characters out to Strength of Raging Fire it. And I'm pretty sure that is my plan, but I guess, spoiler alert, it does not come to fruition. I'm going to Strength the Genie, which is an evasive character that I will have a hard time dealing with. And then I'm going to put a Prince and Bodyguard mode. So the Prince and Bodyguard mode is good for aggro because it means that the Elephant would have to go through it, leaving no damage on the Elephant. However, with the amount of answers in their hand that Blurple can have, he can Hades away my Bodyguard, which means that he can now push his own kind of control game forward by choosing his battles, being able to put as much damage on his Elephant as he can so that he can move those damage counters around. And you can see there that he's going to move 2 to the Tiana, which will mean that that Tiana is just going to be a lot easier for him to pick off in the next couple turns. I did say ramp was good early game. However, there's no problem doing the ramp late game, especially if it gives you the card draw. And being able to draw the card off that sail and another card off of Genie is going to let him be able to kind of reload his hand up. So you can see as he kind of flips through his hand there, he's got options like Into the Unknown, and he's got a Dumbo for more card draw. So he's going to get as many kind of as much value out of his characters as possible. I am going to quest to try to keep my characters as safe as possible, but you can see that how that damage moving it around was still able to take out the Mulan. He was able to sing to get rid of my characters, and he's kind of picking away at my field enough that it's going to leave me not only top decking, but also empty boarded, and he's just loading up on more and more characters. So he's got a Basil out, he's got a Dumbo, which means next turn he's going to be able to draw a bunch of cards. Now, looking at this board state, he's at 9. It might be very tempting just to quest out, but you don't necessarily want to do that. You want to be able to be looking at how do you draw cards, and that Dumbo's going to let him draw cards, and then he's going to quest out here. So there might be an argument if he wasn't that close to be able to draw more cards, but this is far enough behind that I am going to call the game there, and that is Dumbo takes it. All right, so that was a game that or I guess a match that I played against John. Thank you again to John for playing with me. John is a fantastic player, has been playing card games for a very long time, and I always appreciate when somebody who's really good with the deck comes and sits down and plays with me, because that's kind of one of the best ways that I find to learn, is by watching somebody just kind of be amazing with the deck and then try to figure out how they did it so that I can go do it myself. So I hope you can learn these lessons from me as opposed to having to go and get beat by Blurple a bunch of times in order to be able to learn them yourself. So to recap, early game, you want to play your cards like your Royal Guard or your Rafiki to be able to threaten the aggro deck's characters. If the aggro deck quests, and you can take out those characters effectively, so that is taking out the character in one turn as opposed to having damage stick around and your character gone, you want to do so to be able to stall them and to be able to kind of like get you to that mid to late game. Mid-game, you want to be playing cards that draw you cards. So in the case of Blurple, play your evasive characters, especially if you have a Dumbo, so you can start drawing cards and questing with them or challenging with them without a huge amount of threat in return, especially if your opponent has no evasive. Or to be playing cards like Genie that draws you card right when he gets in. You can also, especially if you need challengers, play cards like Madam Mim Elephant. She bounces a character, which means you can either keep a character safe by bouncing it back to your hand, or you can bounce a character that has a enter play trigger like Genie. And then you have Madam Mim to stick around and be able to move damage around and be able to kind of pick your battles and pick where you want those that damage and those threats to go. Lastly, you want to be able to get to that mid to late game where you can play your cards like Elsa the Fifth Spirit, exert whatever you want to get rid of, and throw your characters into it to get rid of it and start cleaning up their field. As soon as you can start removing more than one character a turn, you're in a really good position. Singing into the Unknown to be able to get rid of problem characters that you can't cleanly take out in one challenge, or that might take out your characters in return. You want to keep your characters around is also a fantastic option. Bring it up late game to playing Hades to just get rid of whatever you want or whatever you need to, and even finishing it up with a big Elsa to be able to turn their character sideways and either buy you that extra turn or to be able to start challenging those their characters by turning them sideways is a great idea. That is the gist. That is the big strategy. Go give it a try. My thoughts here are that Blurple is a complicated deck to play because it has a lot of moving pieces and because it's a different strategy than most people start with. But it is not an impossible deck to learn how to play. You don't have to be the smartest player in the room to play it. You just have to believe that you can play it and know what its strategy is. So go give Blurple a try today, and I'll post another video next week where we're going to talk about the very beginning of the game and start with an opening hand and mulligan decisions to be able to figure out how to sculpt your perfect beginning play against whatever you happen to be playing against.